is the instrument monitor. This is a very cool tool. I'm going to go ahead and put it up on this chart. All right, you'll see it in the upper right-hand corner. The cool thing is you can move this. When I first started using this chart, this was not something you could do, so it's something you can do now. You can actually move it. And I did want to mention really briefly to everybody here, I know we talked about it before, but I just want to mention it again. Anytime, now obviously we're downloading these from oops, bear with me a moment. Obviously we're downloading these from the website, okay? The IBFX website. And because of that, you know, it's a trusted source, so there's not as big an issue for whether you've got any kind of issue with bad code or suspect code. Before you actually go about just carte blanche giving someone control of, you know, your platform, even your computer, be very cautious with that option that says the DLL. Okay, be very cautious with that. I just like to mention that. That's just my 2 cents. I always like to mention that. Just bear with me one moment. So I just like to mention that because when you have a situation like that where you're actually, I'm actually trying to dig up a window here that's overlapped itself. There we go. Okay, so what I like to mention here is, see this check mark right here, allow DLLs? Don't just carte blanche check that off, because you are, at that point, if it is not a trusted source like IBFX.com, you are opening up a certain Pandora's box here by doing so. So while I know there's plenty of community out there and a lot of code and a lot of, you know, free indicators, be very cautious. That's just something I like to warn people about. Again, if it's coming from a non-trusted source. If you're getting it from IBFX, don't sweat it, but you don't necessarily need to check that off. I know a lot of people just do it automatically, and I like to caution people against that. All right, so if you notice the instrument monitor here, very cool tool. The instrument monitor is essentially, as you can see, it puts up the 8 symbols, okay, US dollar index, Euro US dollar, pound, the cable, the dollar yen, the Swissy, the Canada, the Aussie, the Kiwi, right? In this little small section, you can move it around your charts if you like. Just basically, the red indicates the currency is trending down in more pairs than it is trending up. The blue indicates that that currency, like for example here you can see the US dollar. The blue indicates it's in a neutral. The blue indicates it's trending up on more pairs than it's trending down, and the black is essentially neutral. So here's your black. You can see the Aussie right now is trending down in more pairs than it's trending up. Okay. So what you're able to do by applying this on your chart is making informed decisions about a currency's relative strength. Okay, it's a much more broad view, and just by looking at your chart, you can keep this running on any chart that you want. Just by keeping this running on your chart, you're able to monitor every one of these currencies in real time. And while the Euro US dollar, the British pound US dollar, the dollar yen, and you could even include the Swissy if you want, the dollar Swissy, are considered the majors or the major dollar correlated pairs. Okay, the majors typically are just the fiber, the cable, and the dollar yen. But all of these, the fiber, the cable, by the way, the Euro US dollar is sometimes also called the fiber. The fiber, the cable, dollar yen, the Swissy, the Canada, the Aussie, and the Kiwi. These are a combination of dollar correlated majors as well as the popular commodity currencies or COMDOLs, and they probably comprise some of the most actively traded pairs day in and day out. You can take a look at BIS, the Bank of International Settlements.org, for that type of information. But generally speaking, in my experience, you'll notice that these are probably some of the more popular traded currencies. They are in my world. That's pretty much my world here. I do look at a few cross rates, but this is pretty much where my focus is on most days. So what you're able to do, again, is see the relative strength across multiple popular currencies, okay, and compare them. Now, generally speaking, if my U.S. dollar is strong, there are certain currencies that should be weak and plotting red. Now, they won't always do so. Never assume something is always going to do anything, right? But generally speaking, if my U.S. dollar is strong, I'm going to notice that certain pairs are going to be weak. Most notably, the Euro-US dollar, the fiber, as well as the cable, the British pound US dollar. You'll also notice the two COMDOLs, the commodity currencies of the Aussie US dollar and the New Zealand dollar US dollar will also typically be moving lower. That is, again, when the US dollar is moving higher. The dollar yen, the dollar Swissy, and the dollar Canada. Now, the dollar Canada is another COMDOL that often will move with the energies complex. Okay, but it does have also a certain aspect of reflection back to the dollar. I mean, obviously it's trading against the dollar, but because of its COMDOL status, it does have a lot of reflection of what's happening in energy, specifically crude oil. Okay, the Swissy will often move with the momentum of the dollar. It's a sympathetic correlated chart, but again, nothing always does something the same way. Okay, the dollar yen also will often move with the dollar, but it sometimes can also be affected by the risk aversion, risk appetite play that you'll see in equities. In fact, these last few sessions with what's been happening in equities, these big drops, these big rallies, you'll see risk aversion and risk appetite being played out in a very large scale, in a very dramatic way. And the dollar yen is very much, to many traders, at least to myself, very much a risk barometer pair because of its very low interest rate and people's tendency to borrow that cheap yen to purchase higher yielding assets, and typically riskier assets like equities. Okay, so again, it's kind of a risk barometer. So when we take a look at this mini monitor, it's just a way to kind of keep an eye on not just the individual currencies here, but their relationship. Because I will tell you, certain days when the relationship isn't clicking like I normally see it should, and by the way, you'll be able to see the relationship pan out a whole lot clearer when you just keep this on your chart. You'll begin to see the way these move to a certain degree with one another, whether it be an inverse correlation or a sympathetic correlation. And the more you watch it, the more you'll see that rhythm and that relationship of the market. And this is a very easy way to see it at a glance right on your chart. That is the instrument monitor. Again, you can download that right at ibfx.com. All right, so here are the two topics I'm really stoked to talk about here today, because these are tools that I use quite avidly, and they're probably the more, I'd say, complex, maybe even the more popular of some of the tools, and that's the pivots, which is not terribly complicated, but we can go ahead and just take a quick peek at the way it looks in your chart.